welcome back. We've got a double bill here of what the hell is this? Another double bill of this because, again, I've got two films that couldn't quite support their own video, but they do have a linkage, so I thought, I can do a video with both of them for what the hell is this. So one is Victor Frankenstein and one is Spookies. Yes, Spookies is a 101 release which has quite a few. You get the film and you get the extras, but you get commentaries, but you also get two massive documentaries. One about Vidco, which was the producers of this film, and one about the film itself and its background, because this is a film with it was a Frankenstein monster of a film, which is why I compare it with Victor Frankenstein, which is also a Frankenstein of a film. So these are two compromised films. One's arguably better than the other. I mean, Victor Frankenstein's a far better film, far better professionally made film, and it has some wonderful things in it. It also has some massive flaws. But Victor Frankenstein's a film I could happily rewatch, most of any time. The flaws don't bother me that much, but they're there. But it is a wonderful throwback to like the 60s and 70s Hammer films. So imagine it's like a Hammer film done in a mega budget, because it doesn't really take that much from the James Whale films. So I'll talk about Victor Frankenstein first, then I'll go on to Spookies. Victor Frankenstein takes a lot from Hammer. Hammer, the James Whale films and the Universal films that followed, all took the monster as the central character. So it was all about the monster. Frankenstein character was gone after two films. Partially because Colin Clive had a drinking problem. And just basically, they just kept on changing the protagonist, but it was always a monster. In the Hammer stuff, the monsters changed one film to film. And it was about Peter Cushing's Frankenstein character. He was the central character. He was a psychopath. It was a wonderful performance by Cushing. It was where he was allowed to let loose, because a lot of times he played like good guy characters or the guys with the knowledge of how to defeat the monster. In Frankenstein, he got to be a scumbag. He could, kill people, blackmail people. It was just utterly brutal. He was focused on his work. He was going to create these monsters. He was going to find the secret of life, and that was it. That's all it's going to be. So the film went from a young man or youngish man to an older guy who's a bit delusional over like 6-7 films. And there was a reboot 2/3 of the way through with Ralph Bates, which is a black comedy, which this Victor Frankenstein resembles quite a bit, because it's also a black comedy ultimately. So Victor Frankenstein takes that idea of it's the creator who's a monster. The creatures are just creatures. They're poor creatures who will die quickly, and they don't have that much personality. The actual monster is Victor in this film. And, the problem with the film ultimately is, A, there's too much CGI, and also, so it makes the monsters seem a little bit colder than a old-fashioned makeup job. The dance of the monsters can do more, but it means they've got a cold, dead eye feel to them, which means they're not scary. The thing that CGI can't do is fear. Your brain just knows it's CGI and you can't be scared of it. It's just the ultimate thing. It's the thing that kills so many films nowadays. Your brain just cannot accept CGI as scary. It just doesn't do it. It just refuses to do it. It's just like something about it. You know it's fake. I'm not getting scared of that. And this film has a lot of CGI monsters, and they're not scary. The other thing it does is try and analyse Victor Frankenstein to actually try to have a reality of why is he doing this. For the first 2/3 of the film, that doesn't matter. Who cares? And that's the best part of the film. It's about the mania of the guy trying to create life. Then at the end you realise he's doing it for a reason, because he accidentally got his brother killed when he was young, and he's trying to bring another life back into the world to replace his brother. And it's ridiculous motivation for a guy who just simply wants to do something new. It's like you're given an explanation for something we don't need to know. And the explanation is garbage. but it really sinks the last third. I mean, the big problem with this film is the last third is really, it goes from being a black comedy to being this sort of mad monster movie with a little bit of character, and it's like all the worst stuff comes in the last third. But until then, it's a blast because it's James McAvoy as Victor Frankenstein, and McAvoy, when he gets to play a scumbag, is always a joy to watch because he is one of those actors who really enjoys playing villains or playing characters who are a bit morally dubious. You can just tell he just gets a buzz out of playing that. I mean, he started off in a couple of different TV shows in Britain where he got to play characters that were a bit dodgy. And whenever he gets to play characters a bit dodgy, you can just see the joy in his face. He loves playing bad characters. He's good at the good guys, but the bad guys, he seems to get them up in the morning. And this is the ultimate bad guy, the guy who's killing people, is completely immoral. He can be funny, he can be obnoxious, he can just do whatever the hell he wants, and he's the life of the party, and the party's a bunch of dead bodies and gothic. And he just works. Anytime he's on screen, the film, even during the bad scenes, the film's alive because he is so much fun. He's a guy who should have had a series of Frankenstein films. Because, you know, if Hammer had had him in the 60s, they'd have given him a Hammer star. You know. He just understands these films. He understands the gothic nature of this film, how crazy it can be, how this is a chance for him to just to chew every bit of scenery in the film. And the film's worth watching for McAvoy, because he is having a blast. He's like so much better than everyone else in the film. Daniel Radcliffe plays Igor, who's his assistant, who is a guy who is a hunchback, but turns out the hunchback was actually just a massive cyst that Frankenstein actually managed to sort pretty quickly. But he's a really smart, he's very observant, he reads a lot of medical books. So he becomes the assistant because he's good at stuff that Frankenstein isn't good at. Frankenstein's the big idea man, and Igor's like the guy who pays attention to details. So they work well together because one wants to hide his shadow and get everything right, and one wants to be, hey, it's me. A natural partnership on screen works. I mean, one of the reasons why McAvoy's so much fun in this film is because Radcliffe's actually knows he's a straight man. Like, anytime he's with Radcliffe's with McAvoy, he knows he's a straight man. He's like, okay, I'm a straight man. So it's actually a good performance because he understands his role. His role is to let that guy look great. There's other nice scenes where he's basically playing this freak who is not quite used to his own body because he was a hunchback, now he's not, and he's never quite comfortable ever. You're basically watching him be uncomfortable through the whole film, and it is good. It's very enjoyable because Radcliffe is embracing the melodrama. Because they started out playing they started out with Harry Potter, which is not the most interesting character. That's a character where everyone else is more interesting. But he's built himself up as an interesting actor as he goes along, and in here he understands the gothic nature, so he's like quietly getting into the part by letting another guy do the big thing. But he's a very good performance though, because he's always paying attention, he's always reacting well to everybody, he understands what his part is, you know, in the film, and it's a good building performance for a career. It's one of those performances that's not going to jump out at people, but it's like when you look back, like, yeah, that's a good performance, that's another step up for him. And you needed someone like that in this film. You really did. And it's like, those two are so well matched that any of the flaws in the script and the execution tend to be able to throw it away because it's like, well, every time we go back to those two, it's fun. You know. Radcliffe has a romance with an acrobat that gets injured. He saved her life, and she gets taken out of poverty into this richer life, and they form a bond. It's well done as well. It's a bit cliched, and it's a bit where somebody has to say, look, what you're doing is wrong. What this person's doing is wrong. You have to kill yourself with it. It's that kind of cliched story. It's the fullest scene you get in a Frankenstein movie. You have to have get through to get to the good stuff. And it's not particularly well written, but it's performed well, and you don't really mind it. It's like one of those ones like, oh, I know I need these scenes to get to the point. But the big problem with the film is there's lots of scenes where it's like, you need this in a Frankenstein movie. But you don't really need it's only so the film cannot be called immoral that have these scenes. The worst performance is Andrew Scott as the guy investigating Frankenstein, who's a religious guy, and he believes what Frankenstein's doing is an abomination. And it's not a bad actor, basically it's a miscast actor. He's doing his best, but he's too much of an actor like McAvoy, who's a scenery tour, who's someone who is a big actor, who's much more interesting when he's big. In this one, this character's so repressed, you don't buy him as it. You just do not buy him as this repressed character. It's either he's been directed to not go too far with it, not go into the grotesquerie of it, or he couldn't find it himself. But there's something wrong, and it's like, these scenes become, they're okay, but they're not rising to the level they should, and it becomes this thing with investigation, this kind of clunky thing going through the film that you need to either let Scott actually be a grotesque weirdo trying to out-act McAvoy in these scenes, or cast someone else and make them more stolid. You needed something, but this mix of act and part just didn't work, and it was the thing that keeps on slowing the film down as we get going. But it's still one of those things where I like those kind of films where you get an odd bum performance. A bum note performance that's just, it slows the film down. If you watch Hammer films, there's plenty of those in those films too. So I was fine with that. I was like, well, okay, you get that in these films. It's annoying because it's a good actor, but he's not been directed right, or he's been given something that doesn't fit with him right. It's one of those things that either should have rewritten the part to suit him or cast someone else. It just doesn't quite hang together. And it just slows the film down whenever it's about to get completely over the top. But you need the characters there to get the plot moving. There's a villainous Toph who's also in it, who's manipulating Frankenstein. He's way over the top, and that's what's fun, because you know he's going to die horribly at some point in the film, which he does. But you don't see it as well as you should. You wish you'd seen more of it, of his death. Because that's the third act, and the third act is cut to hell. So there's lots of little silly, like, you see a lot of character actors you know from British TV in the background or in small parts doing their little thing. You know, it's full of character actors who, like Paul McGuigan directed it, he did a lot of Sherlock stuff, obviously. That's what he got Andrew Scott from. And he brings in a lot of good character actors in there. And he directs it pretty well the first 2/3 of the film. It's very Sherlocky and trying to be smart ass in some of the visuals. And he's pushing too hard, but because this is such a tacky film, ultimately it's a ghoulish exploitation film with a zombie monkey in the middle of it, that it doesn't matter. It's way over the top, and the director's going way over the top as well, and it's like, oh, it suits the film. The film is garish, the film is lewd as hell. You know, Max Landis wrote the script, and it's tacky as hell, basically. Which is what's wonderful about it, because you give it to McAvoy and he just goes crazy with it. So this is like the least respectable Frankenstein you can do, outside of going into porn. You know. But the third act is like where it just becomes a Frankenstein movie where you have to build a monster, you have to have the big monster scene going mad, but because it's CGI, you feel nothing. I mean, in the sequence with a crazy monkey earlier on, it's a CGI monster, but it's really tacky looking, but it's kind of enjoyable. In like a Congo-like way, because it's tacky as hell, but it's something that would normally in another older film would have been a dodgy looking puppet. So it kind of suits that it's tacky. It's like, you don't need it to be realistic, you just need to be tacky and fun. And I'm smashing this bloody zombie monkey up is fun. When it gets to the big monster at the end, it's like, the monster has no soul, it's a soulless eyes, but because it's not an actor, it's a CGI creation. It just feels like a CGI creation, you don't really feel the fear. And the whole final third is Frankenstein's been conned by this guy. He knows he's getting conned. There's all this monstrous stuff, and Andrew Scott's going to come and stop it all, and it takes place in a big castle. And there's lots of quick cuts, and things happen, and it's like things is over after that, and it's like, well, there was no real dramatic point to any of this final third. It feels it was rewritten. You don't even get to see the villains die in a satisfying way. So it's been the big selling point of a Frankenstein movie is the big scene with the monsters alive, and that's the worst part of the film. Which I think probably got around at the end's garbage. The big monster's garbage. The monster's just pretty much typical tacky Frankenstein monster, and it doesn't really work. But it doesn't kill the movie, it just makes the movie fall down a little bit at the end when it needed to do something lewd and outrageous in the finale, and didn't do that. If it had done that, it would have been a perfect guilty pleasure movie. Instead, it's a 2/3 of the way through guilty pleasure movie. Then it goes into boringness for the final third, which is a shame. But it's still a fun, tacky, ridiculous film. But if you're in the mood for enjoyable trash, where studios spent way too much money in a film they did not understand and didn't realise how tacky it was, and then when they saw it, it was like, oh, that's a film we made. Oh, it's that kind of thing. It's like a complete waste of money. I enjoy it. I'll happily rewatch it anytime. So, it's definitely what the hell is this? I probably talked about that more than I expected. Now, Spookies. Spookies is a Frankenstein monster of a movie because it started out as one movie, became another movie after the directors were fired and the editing, and then they add stuff that makes no sense. And it's still too short, and it feels like no movie was actually ever shot properly, and it is one of the worst films you'll see if you watch it. It's wonderfully awful. I mean, nothing in this film works. It's one of those films that nothing works. Because you look at the documentary later, the directors of the original say, well, the problem was we shot it as one thing, and then we get fired. The producer, Michael Lee of Vidco, wanted a different film, and he brought in another director who shot stuff, and they edited the film so that none of the shots they'd shot matched the way they planned to, so the film looks tacky and by mistake. And there's some shots where they're reacting to something that's not there because it was meant to be special effects added later, and they kept it in the film and stuff like that throughout it. And things happen that should have happened later, and it makes no sense. And yeah, you can see there's a lot of all that mess there. And there's also a bit where these mud monsters are chasing people and they're farting. There's all that stuff which the original directors hated. But the problem with that is the footage from the original looks far worse than the footage from the reshoot. I think it looks far less professional. It looks gaudy as hell. The cinematography looks garbage and looks unprofessional. The performances are terrible. Performances all over are terrible. And it's like, this film would never be any good anyway. I mean, there's no way this film would be any good because the performances are terrible. They've hired bad actors and their acting is atrocious. And the characters are awful. And the plot development's awful. And the only thing keeping it going is how tacky it is by all these reshoots of added stuff that don't make sense. You're thinking, okay, would this make sense if we had the original thing, which is basically an Evil Dead rip-off? It'd probably been garbage. It'd probably been a forgettable horror movie that no one really liked, because the directors wanted to make a different film. They had to make this film to try and get money for their film. And they were basically under the gun of doing a film they weren't interested in. So they tried to do the best they could. So you're never quite sure if the tone we're going for is something specific. If they had their own cut and their own music, it might have made sense. But I don't think it was any good either, because the performances are so bad in this film. The dialogue is so bad in the original short stuff that it's like, this would never be good. This is a disaster. You can see why the producer panicked, because it is terrible. So they shot this other stuff that makes it even worse. because it makes no sense of what's going on, and there's some plot points suddenly that make no sense. You've got these other actors doing these stuff that makes even more nonsense of what's originally shot. So originally shot there may be supernatural elements where people can't open doors and things. And then you shoot stuff so there's someone on the other side of the door keeping the door closed for reasons that never make any sense. There's monster stuff that you barely see that apparently was meant to be much bigger, but they weren't shot properly because the directors were fired. There's this whole bunch of stuff that makes no sense, but makes even less sense because of what's added. And there's funny stuff like the producers said that the producer division wanted no zombies because all zombies were overdone, so they didn't shoot any zombies. And then when the film came back to reshoot it, they shot zombies as covering around the house, and it was like, well, we chose not to do that. And it's a case of the plot, because of the different changes in the plotting of the producer, things that could have been worked into a plot weren't. And they've got this monstrous mutation of a film which has, you know, some monsters that are very kind of old gods thing, then zombies, and then these other apparitions, and then people going mad, and terrible actors dying slowly. It's the worst comic relief ever in a film. And when they shoot the reshoot, there's an actress playing the dead wife of the villain who's in her coma, who comes back from the coma and doesn't want to come back because she hates her husband because he's evil. She's the worst performance ever in the film. It's so terrible. She cannot even say lines right. The lines are so cringe-inducing and terrible. It's like, why was this ever allowed in a film? She makes the original cast look good. The whole film feels that way. It just feels like, what the hell happened? It's like they brought in the original people who didn't do a good job, and then brought in somebody else who did an even worse job, and added stuff that was terrible, and it was like, wow. I mean, when you're firing zombies through a supposed suspense sequence, that's a sign things have gone really bad. The whole film is a wow, in a sense of, you can't believe you're watching this film. It's a wow film. It's a film where it's like, ooh, what happened? And you see the documentary, you're still thinking, what happened? Because you see the logic of what happened, but there's still so many decisions that are made before that. In every way, there was like, well, why did you do that in the first place? That was stupid. And it's probably bad producing and bad writing and people not making a film they don't want to make repeatedly, because no one wanted to make this film, and then when they reshot, the person had to bring in didn't want to make that film either, but had to do it anyway. And it's like, it's the ultimate disastrous film. It's the ultimate reshoot. It's the low budget version of the Justice League movie that Joss Whedon did. But, you know, Spookies is more fun to watch because it's more of an obvious disaster. So yeah, Spookies is, you have to see it as, you have to watch it for the film, how terrible the film is. You have to watch the documentary afterwards because the documentary is insane. Especially some of the actors are self-delusional about how professional they were as actors, because the acting is awful throughout, and you get real stonkers of self-delusion in this documentary. That's why it's worth seeing, because people are delusional about their own talent and the talent of others that they like, that they're pals with, but they're delusional with how bad they are as actors. So it's a wonderful buy, but for the wrong reasons. I definitely recommend Spookies for, you know, looking at a film going, what is this? I mean, this is just stunner. It's a real Frankenstein movie. So, I hope you enjoyed this video of these two bizarre films, and I'll be back soon with another video, but this Spookies is not one you get over anytime soon. Right, bye for now.